I think this article is really interesting because it highlights the dichotomy between the good and the bad, if you will. You know, CBD is seen as this kind of affluent thing. I know my patients can't really afford it. Mm-hmm. It's really expensive. I had a patient coming to me with this little tiny vial and it's like, it's $80. And so it's cost prohibitive. But then we have this whole issue with what's happened with the community, especially people of color, and how they've been targeted for years.
Yep.
And this is an access issue,
right?
CBD, but also there's this kind of that dichotomy where we're quick to criminalize this kind of this medication and stuff. So I'll give you some facts here because this is what's fascinating to me. Even though whites and blacks tend to consume cannabis at the equal rates, they typically blacks are arrested 4 times more often, at minimum 4 times more often than whites are for the same kind of possession issues. In addition, like even in 2018, here in the first 3 months in NYC, in New York, 93% of people who were arrested for cannabis possession in the city were actually people of color. Right. 93%.
Right.
And so we have this kind of idea and that was the first 3 months of 2018.
Right.
And we have this idea that, you know, CBD, if we think about it, they're marketing it to affluent people.
Right.
And then it's kind of this, this
of
piece
course.
Where the THC is wrong.
It's criminalized. You also have, I think is what you were touching on, is quality of product and where it's being marketed in various neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So if those neighborhoods of color, in small bodega type stores where you're beginning to see lower quality CBD product that is still advertised and promoted as this miracle, cure-all type of product, where we know dosages are off, percentages of pure CBD in the product is, we don't know.
Right. Are you going to buy a product because it's lower quality that's going to make you fail a drug test because it's not within the legal limit, or there's too much THC in there?
Exactly.
And so there are issues of accessing safe products in a sense, like as advertised. And how can you, if I imagine a store in Manhattan, if they mess up, there will be repercussions. They'll get sued. Their clients have legal resources to be like, just like we saw with Brass Knuckles.
That's right.
Like those people have resources to go after people who have huge companies. And I don't imagine I don't think I'd be able to go after the chocolate company in my bodega.
100%. And it's the same thing. It's like in the early 90s, there was the malt liquor movement where St. Ides, Wilding Horse, these were like the real cheap malt liquors that would make people go cuckoo, and you would only get them in the bodegas. So, you know, once you pass 96th Street, you're not seeing this in regular delis and stuff.
Right.
So.
Wow.
So interesting.
And it is. I mean, we were having a conversation with a friend of ours today about how much it costs, like for CBD infused drinks and such.
Right.
Like they're like $12 a piece.
That's
I
right.
mean, you can't afford. A lot of people can't afford that.
Yep.
So I get nervous when we start highlighting. And this is what I love about talking about cannabis, is how it's so representative of the issues in our culture. We're talking about like capitalism, for example, and how now cannabis industry is being, big industry is coming into it, and it's a lot of money being infused into it. And we're talking about people making a lot of money, whereas, people in Colorado who are working for dispensaries, aren't making that much money.
Right.
And so there's a huge kind of income disparity we're seeing in this field, and there's still the stigmatization even that exists within this field, that we're quick to demonize THC and not, CBD is the angel,
Exactly.
So it's kind of an interesting, sad but interesting kind of reflection of where we are as a culture.
Especially because of the legal gray area of these products, and it's extremely unfair to have people roll the dice on that, because it kind of seems, all the things we've talked about the show, grandmothers getting busted for CBD.
At
Some
Disney.
people are opening some of the largest distribution centers for cannabis we've ever seen.
Right.
You know, and it just seems like people are going to be getting caught up in this complex regulatory framework in the laws.
Yep.
And they're really, you know, back in the day when medical cannabis was first burgeoning in California, us activists had to put together things like green funds, legal support for medical cannabis patients, funds to help them get their cards so they could be legal patients. But it seems like a hard sell in this day and age to be like, we need a CBD fund for these people who got taken advantage of and are now, you know, got pulled over on the side of the road with an ounce of CBD flower, and you know they were driving through the wrong county that has zero tolerance. Because I think it's something like there's about 14 states that allow CBD products with no THC and absolutely no THC products. So there's like, I think it might be less now. Some states have updated things, but there's some states you definitely don't want to mess around with and even be a picogram over in terms of the CBD. And for those of you listening, wondering what we're talking about, this conversation was inspired by a Marie Claire article about CBD privilege and marijuana legalization. We will share that in our show notes.
It's already shared online as we speak on New Hemp Times Facebook.
So are there any other comments you guys would like to make on that before we move on?
Just real quick, I just think, because I didn't notice until Greer said a couple of weeks ago that there was, you know, kind of products that were in these smoke shops in, you know, Upper Manhattan and in Brooklyn. And I just, you know, I walked in and I'm starting to see.
Yeah, it's weird. It's almost like it's like you're tripping or something, because first you never saw it and now you see it everywhere. You're like, oh my God. Once you know what the products look like, you know how to identify them. It's everywhere. Right next to the Twix bars is, you know, CBD gummy rings, CBD this. Now I'm seeing CBD and kratom stuff everywhere. And I also got to imagine if any of these products are contaminated or adulterated with substances, as kratom has been shown to be, while it is, you know, a fairly like people are using it for opioid-related therapies, it is spiked with random stuff sometimes. And, you know, there's healthcare implications there with people taking drugs of unknown origins.
Absolutely. And we just don't know. We don't know what's in a lot of these things.
So, well, so I think we have a long way to go in terms of involving, you know, a lot of the advocates and patients who made this industry possible, and still protecting people and recognizing that there is privilege in this industry and who can operate businesses, who can access, who can safely carry them and use them in public.
Well,
you know,
we've also talked about, like, I know, Randy, we talked one time about the issues related to minority businesses trying to get into the field and how many hurdles there are, because you have to have, or anyone actually getting into this business unless you're a large corporation, because you have to have so much funding to guarantee.
And
that's
also
crazy.
with a predetermined amount of licenses that are already set.
For now,
per state, we know what the ceiling is. So, you know, you take a state of Maryland that has, you know, whatever, 60 licenses given out, and 87% of them were people of non-color, and 50% of those were out-of-state corporations that moved into Maryland within that year of. So that automatically says how, you know, you need big dollar infrastructure to relocate and then be awarded a license because you hit all of those points.
Right.
You know,
and it's a lot of
a lot
of money and resources that are needed to even apply for the dispensary.
Exactly.